provost at Lehigh University in Pennsylvania. I'm currently PI of the advance grant that we have at Lehigh. I've been involved with advance actually for quite a bit longer than even we've had a grant at Lehigh. I was at University of Wisconsin-Madison before I came to Lehigh, and while I was at Madison was when they got their in the first round of advance grants. So I was on the leadership team then. I was within the College of Engineering, associate dean, and responsible for making sure that the group got well set up within engineering and acclimated and connected and so on. Since I've been at Lehigh, we've proposed and gotten funding for a transformation grant at Lehigh, and we're at the end of the 5th year. We'll go into no-cost extension at Lehigh. Well, in many ways, at Lehigh, the grant is almost all about context. So for us, context was Lehigh's a smaller university, not really small, but smaller. Many of the approaches that might be very promising at large universities, sometimes revolving around changing departmental culture, for example. Not that that can't change at a smaller place, but departments themselves are quite small sometimes. And sometimes one of the ways to change departmental culture is by recruiting new players, new members of the department. That happens slowly when departments are smaller. So our idea was to say, so at a smaller place, smaller departments, perhaps not as easy to get a critical mass of women in a STEM department at a smaller place. How do we figure out how to both have our own ideas as well as accommodate or adapt ideas others have had that work well in bigger places, some of which might work well at Lehigh, some of which perhaps won't. So the context here was smaller place, significant engineering and science content at the university. Weren't at all confident that many of the approaches, interventions others had taken would work in our space. Add to that what we thought were some attributes that we had that we thought might actually be helpful to us in thinking differently about advance. One in particular is that Lehigh is proud of being relatively open to interdisciplinary work. We could still be more open, but compared to a lot of places, the boundaries between departments are easy to cross. Most faculty know quite a few others all around the campus, well outside of their field, their areas. So there's a lot of advantages in a smaller place and that interdisciplinary character. So our thought was combine well-established, and people believe that Lehigh is very good at interdisciplinary activities. Combine what is perceived to be a strength with what might be shortcomings in sort of big school interventions from previous advanced grants that might not work at Lehigh. And that's what we proposed, to say we have some ideas of how this might work at a smaller place that leverages that interdisciplinarity. And we think that might be to our personal advantage, and in fact there might be other institutions like us. Clearly it does you no good to recruit new members if 3, 4, 5, 7 years in folks are leaving because they've found better opportunities or don't particularly find the culture of your place very helpful to them. There we've tended to focus specifically on mentoring, and in some cases even most specifically of late around mentoring what we would call early to mid-career faculty. Meaning Lehigh, like a lot of places over the years, had put quite a bit of energy into mentoring young faculty, newcomers, people who were just at Lehigh for a year or two, new assistant professors. Not perfect at it, always could be better. On the other hand, there already was reasonable awareness of the importance of that and emphasis on that. What didn't seem to be in place, and in fact was evident from surveys of faculty, was past those first few years, that level of energy around mentoring seemed to drop off substantially, particularly immediately post-tenure. So if women faculty came, got good mentoring, worked very, very hard, got to the tenure decision, positive tenure decision, suddenly, in some sense, all that mentoring sort of vanished. Now that you're tenured, you don't need that anymore, do you, really? And yet a whole new set of expectations falls on tenured faculty. You'd been protected from service or committee work. Now everybody wants you on their committee. A lot of other things that weren't on your plate now are. And so in some ways there's a group that maybe needed mentoring more than almost anybody else, and yet there was sort of this belief, well, your experience now, you've gotten past the tenure hurdle, you're good. There's no particular reason to think of mentoring as being an important component of the next phase of your career. So particularly what we focused is on leadership. And here with a few stops and starts, meaning we tried a few things and found out that's not at all what our faculty wanted. So listened again carefully and said, okay, we missed it. Can you help us figure out what would be useful to you? And I think now we've found, I think, a better approach. But the focus has been on leadership. I call it leadership with a small L, meaning leadership in whatever realm you feel like is important for you to acquire leadership skills for. Not necessarily a formal leadership position, not necessarily aiming you at a department chair or some other, you might, but stepping away from that as being a target. And the target is more developing your leadership skills for your laboratory, for within your department, just an informal, for somewhere around campus where you'd like to be more of lead a committee, lead some campus activity off campus. If you imagine that part of your career growth might be you'd like to have a significant role in your national organization for your discipline. So so the goal is to say you choose the leadership area you think you'd like to develop, and what our program will propose to do would be help us find a leadership mentor for you, someone who might know how to help you make that happen. It will take several years, but can help you with that. And we'll provide a little bit of seed funding for travel, for other things to help make that start. So those are the basics of what our program's about. What we're counting or looking at are basically the same things regardless of single discipline, multidiscipline, interdisciplinary. What's difficult for multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary people is sometimes the ways we tend to do those evaluations usually have their home within a department, so a single discipline. They may or may not be well equipped to evaluate you for the broad array of things you do that are outside of that traditional discipline. Maybe very little of what you do is in that traditional discipline, yet the way the structure works at Lehigh in most places is we kind of formalize the tenure process beginning within a department and moving to college and so on. So the challenge there is in some ways the disconnect. For the inattentive department, which may not be very aware of your work outside, may not value that very highly, may come to the conclusion the actual amount of work you've done is not substantial. The challenge there is to say, so if a department sometimes is not able to be the right group to accurately evaluate the breadth of your work, who is? And how do we formalize that in a way that everybody understands how this works? No mystery, no surprises, no I don't know who's making decisions. Gets the right people evaluating your work to have it fully and appropriately evaluated, and yet still honors the characteristic of tenure where we want faculty to be the ones who can evaluate their colleagues and can say what meets the requirement and the expectations we have. Our premise at the beginning of our work on the advanced grant was that an interdisciplinary character or institution would be one that would be more attractive to prospective women faculty in STEM than one that was much more rigid or more traditionally disciplinary. Certainly that's an observation that one could make about some of the newer disciplines in STEM fields. So we started with that premise, and in fact the social science part of our IT grant was to actually question that, to investigate that very issue and say, well, is that true? Can we find evidence either at Lehigh or elsewhere that suggests that that is in fact the case, whether from faculty satisfaction or success in whatever measures we might look for, publications, tenure, and so on. Can we show that that's actually true? And probably moreover, since the evidence may be a little bit mixed on that point, is there more to it than just interdisciplinarity that actually will attract women faculty and retain women faculty? That is, that may be a good starter, but that may not be sufficient. So that's what the social science part was about, is to let's investigate that. Meanwhile, on the intervention part, we started saying, let's say that at least in some way there is some truth to that thought. And how do we build on that? How do we make that more available to people? How do we make it easy to enter that interdisciplinary realm? How do we make new faculty confident they won't be penalized? We just talked about tenure and the tenure process. How can we build confidence that that's not more difficult for folks who choose to be in these interdisciplinary fields? So we've been, on the intervention side, been working very hard on that part, while the social science side has been trying to help us understand if that's an accurate statement, what else goes with it, and if it's less than completely accurate, how do we describe what seems to be the evident interest that many women have in interdisciplinary fields. Certainly the way we've done it, I think advance bolsters the interdisciplinary nature. I think it has turned out, in many respects for us, to be very much supportive of the interdisciplinary character, in the sense that advance has no particular discipline associated with its name. Most people who are even aware of it couldn't identify there is any preferred science or engineering disciplines that are favored, which is wonderful. So when we talk about advance on our campus, in some sense it covers all sciences and all engineering, and everyone can easily accept that this is very much not a disciplinary focused activity. So in my view, I think advance is very open to interdisciplinarity. I wouldn't say it requires it, but it certainly has worked well for us in that regard. I would say a quick piece of advice to someone who wanted to do something, an institution similar to Lehigh, who wanted to implement whether some of the things we've done or at least look at some of those same issues. I would say, first of all, don't be afraid to try a few really good ideas. They almost certainly will not all work. You don't want to damage or put at risk any of your faculty. On the other hand, if you choose carefully, that's unlikely to happen. But not all will be as successful as you'd like as well. So I would say start out with a relatively small set of objectives and a small set of interventions, and track them carefully, and don't be shy or worried that some of those will not work as much as you had hoped. That's probably going to happen, and new ideas will arise. So be flexible about where you go, keep your eyes on your overall objectives, but be flexible about how you achieve those. And I think, given that if you're listening carefully to your audience and to the participants, you'll learn as you go. Some of your ideas will work wonderfully and others will need to be modified. And I think that's part of the great learning experience that an advanced grant or a similar activity allows you, is you get to learn as well as practice what you think is really important.